This is our final episode of Making Sunday Happen. This week we're going to take a trip down memory lane, and I'm going to share some of our favorite clips and memories over the last 8 years. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. Bittersweet this week, as this is our final episode of Making Sunday Happen. But I've been sharing with you over the last couple of months that even though this podcast is coming to a close, I will be moving over hosting duties for a brand new podcast that we will be releasing called Your Visuals Matter. And we are moving from 1230 Media to Church Visuals as our brand new name and brand. We are very excited about this move. Churchvisuals.com is our new website, so be sure to check us out there, churchvisuals.com. Our new site has over 30,000 pieces of ready-made media for adults, kids, and students that you can download instantly and use at your church. You can also come to us for custom media. And as it relates to this podcast, we are massively expanding our training library, more podcasts, courses, webinars, articles, books, and more. So you're not getting rid of me. We are massively expanding, actually. So just find me over at Your Visuals Matter is the podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the new show. If you would, there will be weekly episodes of that show as well, and it will go kind of in a linear fashion. It'll be a little bit less on the famous names on that show. It's going to be a little bit more linear, a little bit more ministry leaders in the trenches of ministry, making it happen week in and week out. So that is all coming to churchvisuals.com. Be sure to check that out, please. All right, this week on the show is a big retrospective of some of our favorite clips and moments. So let me give you a little bit of history of our show. This podcast actually started under a different name. We actually started under the name The Church Media Podcast back in the day. We did 200 episodes under the name The Church Media Podcast. Then we expanded out for those who plan, create, and execute the worship experience. The podcast just got more popular, and listeners came, and we had worship leaders and communications folks and other folks asking us for some additional content as well. And so we kind of moved from the Church Media Podcast to the Making Sunday Happen podcast. But episode number 200 was kind of when we made that changeover. That was kind of the last Church Media podcast, and 201 started Making Sunday Happen. But that episode number 200 was a milestone for us, as I interviewed a hero of mine in the Christian space, and that is Christian music artist Steven Curtis Chapman. Now, this first clip has no video on it because we didn't start video until episode number 201. So Steven Curtis was the last audio podcast that we did, but I still wanted to drop it here because this was one of my favorites. So here's a clip from my interview with Steven Curtis Chapman. Through this podcast, you're talking directly to people in church world that make Sunday happen. Okay, so that's church production people, pastors, volunteers, first impressions people, and you mentioned you've done a few concerts and worship experiences in your day. Speak to the people who are in the grind, week in, week out, creating worship experiences for people. Any words of wisdom for that crowd?
You know, first of all, my first word would be a word of gratitude and a word of encouragement, because what you do is often very thankless. I know my dad, I grew up with a father who spent several years as a kind of volunteer minister of music in our little church that I grew up in. And I watched how hard he labored to honor God, to do what he did with excellence. And often, you know, there wasn't a lot of appreciation coming from, you know, the people necessarily. It was sometimes more the the expectations as opposed to the appreciation,
Right.
of could you do this? Could you do that better? Why am I not being asked to sing a solo or, whatever the number of things that can be challenges with that. And so I just would first of all say, leading us, and I'll put myself in the congregation side on this in worship, that part of what you do in ministering to the sheep, of the flock every week is so needed and necessary, important and vital. And so thank you for that. And then, the thing that I have found in my own role as being one who does that in more of an itinerant, kind of way, moving in and out of, communities and cities and churches, but still with that same heart of wanting to minister to and encourage the body. I come back over and over again. It's very simple. It's very cliche. We've heard it. But, as we continue to not worry as much about being the worship leaders as we concern ourselves with being the lead worshipers, those who are most amazed, continuing to put ourselves in a place of being amazed at God's love for us, God's grace, in a place of worship, and then just lead out of that, lead out of our brokenness, lead others, serve out of our own, the reality of our own need of God. The more we do that, the more we're going to have the energy and the strength to do it, and the more honest that we are. We all know this, but we've never been more desperate in the church for just honesty in the journey.
Yeah.
And I encourage worship leaders so often, man, just write those songs, lead from a place just as David did in the Psalms when he said, as much as he said, your love is better than life, better is one day in your courts, Lord, I lift your name on high. If you look around that, it was constantly surrounded by a lot of how long, O Lords, are you going to forget me forever? I'm struggling. I'm battling, discouragement, despair, depression, and being honest about that, is so important and needed as well. So anyway, there's a few thoughts that I would pass on to my friends.
That one was one of my all-time favorites, getting to interview Stephen Curtis. It was really special. But let's move on to a clip from episode number 211 of the show, where I interviewed the lead singer. We're going to continue on with this Christian music artist thing. I interviewed the lead singer of Big Daddy Weave, Mike Weaver. And I talked to Mike about leading others when you're going through a storm yourself. Here's a word from Mike. So during this time, you're creating content, you're creating music, you're doing concerts, you're out there every night. How in the world, and you touched on this a little bit, but how in the world did you bring yourself to find joy, put a smile on, sing the songs that you were singing while you're dealing with this?
It was some of it was just in faith, and we just have to go out there and we're like, it literally is just a decision. Like, I'm going to sing this, even though I don't know how I feel about it, but what I'm learning is that our feelings are so fickle, man. We can be so misinformed by our feelings, but the truth of who Jesus is, man, does not waver in any way towards us. The songs I was singing every night didn't have anything to do with my faithfulness to God. Amen.
Yeah.
Dude, they had everything to do with God's faithfulness towards me.
Yeah.
And he would literally carry us through by putting our trust in him, knowing that it's got to come from him. It's got to be from him. He's got to do it, And, yeah, man. And then just one moment at a time. Can you get through the next moment? Can you hang in there? Because it felt like, well, we just need to give up. We need to go take time off. We need to go, but we kind of couldn't because it's also our job,
Right.
And that's a weird thing to navigate,
Right.
all of that. But then professional minister, which I still have not reconciled all of that,
Right.
But man, we try our best to let it be a pure thing, and let the Lord help us in that, we show up.
I think you hit on something good there, in that we talk to a lot of people that are on a church staff that they can't necessarily take a break from. The Sunday's coming. It's on the way.
Dude,
It
yes.
is not going to stop. And you're dealing with stuff personally. So how do you go out there every Sunday? How do you keep going if you're just getting knocked?
You know what happened though, man, is some of the time I would just go out and tell them exactly what was going on, man. You know, that authenticity and just be like, guys, I feel like I am falling apart right now, you know? But at the same time, we focus on something that's greater than us, you know? Yeah. And as we would do that, man, the Lord would meet us there. And it was literally just like, it felt like 15 minutes at a time. You know what I mean? But it's crazy because when we would say, man, I'm really dealing with this, all of a sudden you see this entire pocket of the room go, me too, you know? And you realize that, man, that's at that point, all of the life part of it has to come from Jesus. All of the ministry, all the power, it's all about him. It's not a formula. It's not anything else, man. You know, it is a person. I used to have these huge theological headbutting matches about how sure I was about this or how sure I was about that. Man, all of that went out the window in the storm, dude. You know, man, I was in the ambulance with my brother, man. My brother's back there. His wife's following us in their car. And I heard Holy Spirit say to my heart, he said, how's this line up with your religion on paper? And I'm like, God, I got nothing. All I have is you. And I'm telling you, Carl, dude, it came back so quickly. He just goes, I am all you are ever going to need. And so when I come across that like great statement or whatever, and I want to live in that place and be like, whoa, I need to share that again and again and again and again. Man, that is already it's got an expiration date on it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like we got to learn to live in the moment. I'm talking to me right now. I'm not preaching at somebody like we need to, you know what I mean? Yeah. We need to learn how to live in the moment with Jesus. And the truth is that does not start when you're planning for Sunday morning. Dude. Right. There was this day, I remember this, man, and forgive me if I'm going a different direction than you want, but man, I remember this day I was walking in the hotel or something and I heard Holy Spirit say, pick up that towel over there. And I'm like, that's not God. Why would you tell me to pick up the towel? I got about 5 steps away and clearly, man, I heard this. He said, you're telling me you're going to get all the way to the end of this night and wonder what I want to do in the room because that's the first time you decided to listen to me. It wasn't about the towel at all. It was about walking with him. It was about hearing him. And we got to hear him in the times way before we get to Sunday morning because ministry comes from the overflow of intimacy with Jesus, not from our, planning center agenda, right? It's like it has to come from knowing him, And this is the great thing though. You do not have to convince him to be in relationship with you. Man, he made every way. I mean, Jesus is the way, like literally, while we're as messed up as we can be, before we even existed on the earth, right? I mean, God demonstrates his love in this, that while we're yet sinners, Jesus died. He made a way because he wants to have that intimate relationship with us. His church is his idea. I mean, maybe not the format that we go through or whatever, but the church, his bride, that's his idea. Yeah. If you want to see fruitful ministry, we got to get with the one. We got to get with the bridegroom himself, When
we were all in lockdown in March of 2020, if you remember back then, nearly 0 churches in America met in a physical location on Easter of 2020, which was absolutely crazy. We had an opportunity to bring together several thought leaders in our space into one big, huge Zoom call to talk through what we were seeing, what we were experiencing. So a lot of thought leaders here in this next clip, but here's a clip from that episode. Luke, you mentioned Facebook, and a lot of people, I agree, a lot of people thought that Facebook was going to shut down or that it was, going to be a heavy burden on online. And Katie, I saw you mention that we had the biggest day in online church history. I
don't have any stats to actually prove that. It just felt like it had to have been the biggest day in online church history.
We have to believe you. We have to go with it. What do you make of that, Katie? What do you think that what do we make of basically every church in America moving to online?
I think it's really cool that we embraced it so quickly. It was definitely hard. There was definitely a switch that had to flip in a lot of churches' mind about the building, and that we're not the building, that we can be gathered like just through the internet. And so I'm honestly very proud of all the churches, that just went to work immediately and sought after. I think a lot of them immediately thought, like, it's got to be super professional. We need to do it in the sanctuary. And I think as time goes on, we're probably going to see that change in the next couple weeks. So I honestly think it's better for it to be more stripped down. It's okay for it to be from your pastor's house. It's okay to stream via Zoom, like have your worship pastor at his house and your pastor at their house, and then y'all switch back and forth, because we've never done this before, right? And so we don't know what it really looks like. But I just think it's so awesome that that we were able to pull off last Sunday, right? Last Sunday was such a big, I think, historic Sunday for many churches. And so this coming Sunday is also going to be another big historic, because there's a lot of churches that went ahead with having church last Sunday. Right. Many of them actually saw an increase in people coming, which is just wild. That doesn't normally happen.
Yeah.
And so I think it's encouraging that the church is going forth and helping people. And yeah, there's Kenny. Hey, Kenny.
Hey, Kenny. What's going on, buddy? Yeah, I agree with you. And it's kind of unprecedented. There was a church of they run 2,000 or 3,000 people on a weekend here in town, our largest Methodist church, and they met on Sunday. Obviously, they will not meet this coming Sunday. So I think just kind of preparing for several weeks, up to 8 weeks or more of seeing this. Ben, what does that mean for pastoring? Obviously, we can't be in person with people physically in a physical location, but we can still minister. And I want people to understand that our job hasn't changed in pastoring our people. Yeah. How do we go from here as far as pastoring?
Yeah, the 3 words that I've been coaching other pastors with is hope, pivot, and merge. And this is something that we've been telling ourselves here at Christ Fellowship Miami as well. So first of all, hope. People are in desperate need of that. You may not know how you are going to do this, but whatever you need, whatever hope you need to receive from Jesus so that you can give it to others, again, in your congregation and in your community, because you're going to have more eyeballs on you. Receive that, fill up your hope tanks so you can give it out to others. So first of all, hope. The second thing is pivot. You probably had your plans for your message series for Easter. You may have your whole plans for the rest of the year. You're going to have a pivot for that. For us here at Christ Fellowship, we had a plan for 6 months, a financial campaign for 6 months. For the last 6 weeks, we were in a message series leading up to Commitment Weekend. Commitment Weekend was for us last weekend. We had to cancel that, and we are in a complete pivot in relationship to that. So we have our nice pristine plans in our hands, but we're learning how to pivot and to do that very quickly to be nimble enough to respond to this. And then the last thing is merge. So you may be a church that is going to come out of this with a rocky financial situation. Yeah. If that's the case, be proactive and start looking for other churches where you may need to merge with. And on the flip side, if you're a church that can help bring along other churches into your body of churches and continue the work of God on their campus under your leadership, think that through. But churches need to do that now, because if they don't, we're going to find ourselves all up a creek. So I'm encouraging churches to think that through on both sides of the spectrum. If you're a church that helps others merge onto you, or if you may need to be a church to merge, we need to be hoping for the best, but planning for the worst in relationship to the financial realities of a continued downturn in the economy and reduced giving, because we're not passing physical buckets as well. So those are 3 things I've been coaching pastors on.
It was really interesting to see what we were thinking through the COVID pandemic and how as a church we were shifting and moving. It was great to see and have that gathering of leaders to chat about that. I enjoyable to kind of go back and listen to that episode and kind of see where we were right, where we were wrong, how we were shifting and moving. So it was very interesting. All right, let's move on to my chat with Brad Weston. Brad is the founder of Renewed Vision and the creator of ProPresenter. And I talked with Brad about the move to Pro 7. Check this out. All right, so get us into Pro 7. So I'm going to talk with Cody Patterson from your team next week about some of the specific features of Pro 7. But I want to talk to you more about kind of the theory behind the build, why the change, why the update, and all that. So get us in there. What were you hearing? What were you experiencing with Pro 6 that led you on the path to Pro 7?
Yeah. We have been, again, having a heart for the church and being a part of that, of the church community for so long. We really want to provide tools that enable the church to do what they want to do to communicate the gospel in creative ways, right? Yeah. And so I'm very grateful myself, again, being a 20-year volunteer of North Point Community Church, that I'm a part of an organization that is very creative. Other people in it, we've been involved with Passion City Church and Passion conferences for a long time. Certainly, those guys are very creative, and so they allow us to, when they have an idea, hey, we want to do these really weird trapezoidal-looking screens, and can you do words on an angle? And can you, at the same time, we want to put the words on a ribbon because we're in a big stadium. This is not a problem that churches typically have. They're not typically in stadiums with a ribbon board and that kind of thing. So all of the development that we actually do is really with the heart to just provide the tool that is necessary to do the job. And that's kind of what's fueled our passion and our flame for this so many years. So ProPresenter 7 is just kind of taking the next logical step with that. And the heart of ProPresenter 7 is ProPresenter in general is its display engine. The display engine is, we want to have the very best video playback possible so that it's appropriate for churches, but it's also appropriate for, broadcast news stations and the Olympics and Disney and all these other things. So what more and more people are doing with the advent of having screens on the stage, in addition to the two side screens, the iMag screens that people see, there's web streams. So there's this need to have multiple outputs from a computer. We have customers that have wanted to have multiple stage displays, that have wanted to have a teaching display, that want to have a separate feed for, doing a large, wide, edge-blended screen or a lyric banner, that just shows the lyrics while simultaneously showing lower thirds on the outputs and that kind of thing. So the real heart of ProPresenter 7 was to just kind of rip things apart and say, all right, we want to do multi-screen. We've done multi-screen for a long time, but it required a specific box, because basically we were using the box being a triple head to go or a Matrox dual head to go. These are boxes that take a really wide image from your computer, because when you plug it in, your computer sees a display that's 3 times wider than a normal display and then cuts it into 3 separate pieces. Well, then we would turn on or off the different layers as you wished to those different outputs, which then the box would take this really wide output and split it into what appeared to be 3 distinct images. Well, that worked fairly well, and I think we were the number 1 reseller of those Matrox boxes for a long time. But clearly, the problem therein is you don't have the ability to do the alpha key and fill. You don't have the ability to show different content on different screens and whatnot. So or to do SDI outputs, that kind of thing. So our vision for Pro 7 really started with the whole display methodology and what can we actually do to create multiple displays to give the flexibility that people wanted for their environments, whether to have multiple stage displays, whether to have, a large lyric ribbon at the same time that they're sending a different feed to their web streams or whatnot. So that is really kind of the big killer feature of Pro 7 is what we actually did with the display engine and being able to have multiple displays, because we heard from a lot of different customers and saw lots of different environments where this was going to add a lot of power to their environment, a lot of flexibility. So
on episode number 300 of our show, we welcome worship leader and songwriter Phil Joel to the show. You might know Phil from the Newsboys. He was a guitarist for the Newsboys. So check this out.
these guys in churches, especially after exiting the Newsboys, I found myself in churches, ministering, doing my thing. And I hadn't before, this was a new thing for me. So I'm kind of learning church culture and how they work. And, so you're a volunteer, but you do this and this and all that. And you're on staff, but I can see how people hit burnout in that world because they get stretched so thin. And, so, boundaries again for those people, boundaries for me now. I need to know how much I can do, when I can do it, what my parameters are, and just stay within those rails. Otherwise, I'm useless to everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell me about, obviously you guys on stage, touring everywhere, popularity. Tell me about these, maybe speak to the worship leader that on how to stay grounded. How do we stay centered in our faith and not realize that it's about, our own ego and things like that? Talk to me about that some.
Yeah. Marry a good woman. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, for me, I've taken on the practice in the last 20 years of just getting up every morning and spending a little time with the Lord and starting my day that way. And I know that's just kind of old school, but it's old school because it makes sense. People have been doing this for hundreds, if not thousands of years, just starting their day, being still, centering on the Lord, centering on Him, realizing and helping Him realize who we are, what we need to be doing this day, how and who we need to love, and how we need to serve and whatnot. Those things that I need that because I'm pretty dang ADD, Carl. So centering like that has been a big deal for me continuously. And I don't know. People ask, how do you handle people coming up and saying, hey, and in the airport or wherever, and I'm like, people, they're not there trying to stroke my ego, or they're not like wowed. I think the genre that we're in, even if it's worship leading or if you're in this, Christian music, gospel music, whatever, the platform is different. What you're standing on is different. And I think what people are sort of trying to say when they're approaching and saying, hey, appreciate you. I think really what they're saying is, I really appreciate what you do. You've helped usher me into something new. You've helped lead me through a difficult period. You've helped soundtrack a joyful period. This has been helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that sort of stuff actually means a lot. If you think that it's about, you, and if you think these people are coming up to you and sort of saying, hey, then it's not going to go far, and it's not going to, it's not going to serve you or anybody else well. But the reality is that's not what people are saying.
In another episode of our show, I talked with Pastor Justin Kendrick about how to build community while serving with our Sunday teams. Here's what Justin had to say. Let's wrap this around the Sunday experience again. So how does this apply if I'm leading a tech team, leading a worship team, if I'm a pastor? How can I apply it to myself to make sure that I'm in community? And then how can I encourage this type of community in my teams?
Yeah, every single gathering is an opportunity to build real community. And I think especially, ladies are typically a little bit better at this. They can just get together and just talk about what's going on in their lives. Guys, we usually need to be doing something else, and then we get to talk about what's going on in our lives. So it's like, hey,
fishing buddies.
Yeah, exactly. Let's all go and play basketball or whatever it is that you like to do. And so honestly, teams on a Sunday are some of the best opportunities to build community. And so because you're doing something else a lot of times, like, hey, we're all greeters, or we're all setting up signs, or we're all, running the cameras. And those are sacred moments where, and we actually teach our teams this, that when you understand these 7 principles, you can begin to say, all right, how can I now leverage those principles for this moment? Like, okay, I made a mistake. Well, I can either become, like recoil and not own it and be awkward, or I can laugh at myself And I just amplified grace. I created an atmosphere of fun. And so it's almost like, think of it like a garden, like, hey, my tech team, my worship team, whatever, it's a garden, and I'm always planting something and I'm always uprooting something. And so if I know these 7 principles, then literally, hey, you've got time every single week with that team to start planting and planting little moments of vulnerability, little moments of fun, little moments of sacrifice, little moments where you create healthy boundaries. Every time you do that, you end up cultivating not just an effective team, but a community of faith. And so I think that it's crazy for us to not leverage those moments every single Sunday. And what is your real job? Just to execute? Is that the job? Or is it the edification of the believer? And so I would say if you're a tech leader, if you're a worship leader, et cetera, your job is not just to get the thing done. Your job is to get the thing done while building community. And so if you don't know these principles of community, it's going to be a lot harder to do that.
So in the fall of 2022 or so, AI and VR really started taking off quite a bit. Even though some AI tools have been around for years, really the AI and VR movement really started taking off in that fall of 2022. And in that period, around then and a few months later, I interviewed DJ Soto. DJ is the pastor of VR Church. I interviewed him about how his church was building immersive worship experiences in virtual reality. Check this out. How are you making, you mentioned making more immersive sermons and stuff like that. What are you making that in? How do you make that? Is that during the week? Is that what you're doing, is creating those worlds in something? Kind of walk me through that process.
Yeah. So currently the way it looks is there's a world build team. So several people that are involved in a weekly basis, because we build a new experience every week.
So that's on your team that you've created. They're in charge of creating those worlds?
Volunteer team. Yep, volunteer team in charge of creating those worlds. Early time,
that's cool.
When the early metaverse didn't have those tools to build in game, so then they kind of arrived, and so that was like, I don't know, I have to go look back, but it was like 2018 where you could start building in the metaverse. And so what that means is, like, you come into an empty space, just looks like a void, black void. And then you open up a menu that says terrain, right? And you click on this button, you see a graphic of like ground, and it kind of spawns in front of you this small. And then with your hands, you grab it, you resize it, you place it, and you could make this massive like football field in just like 2 seconds. And then you start planting trees, and then you start, doing whatever you want to do. And so early VR Church was, we had a template of a world that we used, but then there was like, I think the first build I ever did was the woman at the well. Like on stage, I made a little well with some water, some grass, very unsophisticated, and a frog there just kind of chilling there, just to kind of like, I think a bucket or pail of water. And then and I'm not like creative or a world designer like that, but I just was able to kind of pull that out. And then that evoked a response for people in the crowd who have that, ability and talent. And I was able to connect with some people who just had that sense, not necessarily like, they were like, 3D designers. I mean, one guy was like a mailman from the Netherlands, an artist from the UK. So it's not like, these were professional degreed, 3D world, engineers. Right. They were just, quote unquote, regular people with some incredible talent, just an eye for design and spatial experiences. And so, and then I started handing that off. I was like, man, I would love to see this. And they would build it. So
do you preach in series where you're passing off a couple of weeks at a time? Hey, here's what I'm going to be preaching on. So here are the worlds or illustrations that I need.
Yeah. So we go linearly. So we just kind of go chapter by chapter through the scriptures. So that kind of came about early VR Church 2016 was actually the first church service that I mentioned. I use video teaching, I think from like open resources from Life Church or whatever, because I was like leaving the physical church I was a part of, trying to make ends meet. I was like, I have zero time to prepare a sermon. Quick thought here, a couple weeks into video teaching, I was like, oh, this isn't working. Because in the you don't go to the metaverse, into the matrix, into Inception,
to watch a video,
to watch a screen. Yeah. Right. Maybe like a short one, but I love these guys. I love these preachers. I listen to them all the time, but 30, 40 minutes of a sermon, right? Just doesn't work in the metaverse.
With a headset on. Might as well just watch it on your computer screen.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like, we can do anything and be anything, but we're just going to sit here. The really quickly went right into live teaching. And so, and it was just more like, okay, let's do this passage. And then I was like, well, let's just do the next kind of like, what's next? Right. We're like, and so then that traditionally just set the tone of like, oh, we're just going to go linearly through. So the team, we organize on Airtable. And so they'll see like, okay, we're in the book of, like we started in Luke years ago and went all the way through. Now we're back at Matthew, kind of working on Mark. And so, the team will look on Airtable and say, oh, Matthew 28's coming up. And so they'll have meetings every Wednesday, I think, to brainstorm. And then they're building, they'll say, hey, you build this, you build that. And they'll create this fantastic world. It's like these worlds are shared. It's kind of like a Google Doc where you can add people. So you can add people to your world to build. And it's
your leadership. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that very sophisticated builds now. They're very like when you come into VR Church, it's pretty wild. Like I missed quite a bit of VR Church recently because of COVID, and I moved to Texas, and which speaks really volumes to the leadership that we have. But that they just did an amazing job. But I came back I think my first week in a while was like a week or two ago, and I walked in the world and I was like, they're just taking it to the next level. It looked amazing. It was like a Rembrandt painting in the sky. I don't know. It's hard to explain how beautiful it was.
I talked with Pastor Kyle Eidelman, who's the lead pastor of Southeast Christian Church, about how those who make Sunday happen feel when their way isn't working. How do we as ministry leaders ask for help? Here's Kyle. Do you find as ministry leaders that we struggle asking for help? That I'm the fixer, I'm the helper, I'm the minister. I don't really need to ask for help. So I guess, how do we know when we need help?
Yeah, I think it's not unique to someone who's a minister, but I think it is consistent, meaning that, I talk to some of my friends who are in the medical field, and this is true for them too, right? Like they are helpers. And so it's hard for them to help. You've heard the expression, the doctors make the worst patients, right? So it's not just, I think it's people who are focused in on that. I was, as this isn't in the book, just thought of it, but my wife was having a room in her house painted. I was talking to the painter while he was painting. And I said to him, man, I bet your house is awesome. I bet you keep your house painted, all the time, and you don't have to worry about this. And he kind of laughed and he said, he said that those of us who paint houses have a joke that our houses always need painted the most. In other words, if you're painting all the time, you don't worry about your own house. And I think that is a natural thing that we have to fight against, because the instinct or the intuitive approach is, okay, I'm the helper. If I'm the helper, I don't want to be the person who needs help. And that was something I really struggled with. And I still do. I began to recognize, how many people around me were not only willing to help, they wanted to help, but I needed to let them know I needed it. I needed to ask for it. And then I think one of the mistakes I made that is, I see in my ministry leader friends as well, is I'm not bad at sharing challenges, struggles with people who I know can do something about it. Mm-hmm. But I'm not very good at just sharing them for the sake of sharing them. Right. And one of the things that God has been teaching me on this journey, is the Galatians truth, to bear one another's burdens, and in so doing, you'll fulfill the law of Christ. That there is something really important about sharing a burden with someone, even if they can do nothing to fix it. Like that is part of being in the family of God. I think it's easier for church people to do that than for ministry leaders to do that.
I agree. Totally agree.
And then by the time we do it, things are off the rails and are off the tracks. And you're like, man, if I would have just been a follower of Jesus in the church, I probably would have shared this burden or asked for help, earlier in the process, instead of waiting until things got more obviously difficult.
All right, last clip for you this week. This is a clip from our 400th episode. This was a big one as Chris Tomlin joined me for this episode of the show. Now, let's end with some fun. This is quick, rapid-fire questions with Chris Tomlin. Check this out. All right, rapid fire, just some quick hits for you, all right? Who was your biggest musical inspiration growing up?
Stephen Kershaw.
Oh, dive in. Great adventure, baby.
Yeah.
Who have you met in your career that you have fanboyed over? Same answer?
That was really cool, that first one. But I went to, early on, when I was very first starting, I was doing a weekend youth conference, and I was in a hotel in Minneapolis, and I went to the gym, and there was only one other person in the gym, and it was John Denver. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, like, for me, just growing up with country roads and all the things, I was like, that is the dude. And I didn't say a word. I just stood there, and I was like, this is one of my heroes. And I wish I would have, because he didn't live much longer after that. But that was a cool moment.
Awesome. All right. What is one thing a worship leader could do this Sunday on stage that would help people connect with God in a deeper way?
My buddy Louis Giglio says it the best: to lead from acceptance, not for acceptance. If you can get that right, you're going to be a better leader.
Good. Is there one song that you've written or a song in your catalog that's the most cringeworthy as you look back? What's the song that you want us to burn all the copies of?
Oh my goodness. There's some cringe. You take my, the noise we make. I would say that's my most cringeworthy. There was a record called that.
I remember that album. So I used to take a youth and I was a youth group at Student Life way back in the day.
Yeah.
It was like, that was the noise we make era right there.
Listen to that song. It's like, I listen to it now going, oh my gosh, what was I thinking?
All right. Last one. What is your most embarrassing onstage moment or biggest production fumble?
Man, thankfully I have not had a lot of embarrassing things on stage. Nothing huge comes to mind.
Wow. Any cable mess up? Mic turned off? Somebody fall off the stage?
I've definitely taken some tumbles, tripped, fallen, all those kind of things. Have had so many problems with you're in panic mode because you're embarrassed because your in-ear system is going crazy and no one knows that, and you can't explain it to people that, hey, I know this sounds really bad right now, but the reason it sounds bad is I can't hear a thing. I've got like radio tower in my ear. Somebody's calling in planes to land while I am trying to sing a song. All the things, I've had all that. And so for me, it's been personally embarrassing. For everybody else, everybody's like, oh, that was a great night. I'm like, really? That was the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life.
The show notes for this episode are available now at MakingSundayHappen.com.
All right, gang, we have reached the end of this episode and the end of this podcast. I want to thank you so much for being on this journey. It's been an incredible ride. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm just shifting my hosting duties over to our brand new podcast, Your Visuals Matter. And you can check out new weekly episodes of that show at churchvisuals.com. Again, look for Your Visuals Matter at churchvisuals.com. All right, for the last time, go out there and create some incredible worship experiences at your church this weekend. I love you guys.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit MakingSundayHappen.com.